Gwendy, I'm sorry it happened, but it's over now. I've got to go on living, so they tell me. But how can I when everywhere I turn, there's another reminder of you? You and poor Norman Osborn. These are the coping words of someone exhausted by life's diarrhea, but more importantly, as a reaction, 2 issues after Gwen's death, it's someone who knows how to make sense of his pain. This is the bit where I talk about trauma. Yes, kill me now. Trauma is best described as a rupture in someone's sense of time and space, where an experience is so painful that it can't be made sense of. It will instead live in the mind, like fresh salmon, where you can sit there years later and still think about it as if it just happened yesterday. This is because our sense of time are tied to how capable we are in making sense of the world. If we are to understand ourselves through our responsibilities, that identity will give us the capabilities to appropriate anything that doesn't contradict it. And that's the thing about being Spider-Man. Unless he's told by everyone that his responsibility isn't very responsible, death of a loved one is familiar territory. It's to be expected, son. The key takeaway from all of this is that deep down inside this angry, funny kid, he's not Peter Parker. He's actually Spider-Man. Don't believe me, he literally says it. Maybe now's the time to pretend I'm Peter Parker, boy student. Don't quite know how to face the gang. Peter Parker is the obligation, because investigating villains, venting out his frustrations on JJ, swinging to get rid of his stress, that's what he enjoys. That's his life. His unmasked social life is ironically the mask. It's why he both comfortably and recklessly went from a nerd to a flirty class clown. Why he took such a long time to make friends in university. And right now, why he's comfortable in pushing everyone away. In fact, he ends up developing paranoia at university. The memory's still too fresh. I haven't had time to make peace with myself. Another minute in there, in here, and I'll go boogaboo permanently. I really have to pat myself in the back for my sick-ass voice acting skills. Peter Parker never puts much conscious investment with his friends, unless a girl is involved, really. So where does Mary Jane fit in? Even though my phrasing made it pretty obvious. When she closed that door, she effectively adopted Gwen's social role, the one who looked after everyone. Gwen threw parties, created regular gatherings, looked after Peter when everyone brushed him off as being nuts. Now that Peter and Harry have both isolated themselves in grief, she uses her party girl facade to try and bring them out of their shells.
Hey handsome, don't be a down, you've got to pull yourself together.
In which Flash asks about Harry and Peter yells at him. MJ's day proceeds to comically get worse as she gets blasted by Harry's accusations of infidelity. But then late at night, Peter, after beating JJ's furry son, visits her to apologize. And they spend the night together, mending wounds. I mean, she kicks him out because she's so f***ed off now, demanding Peter to be more cheery next time. And he complies. MJ has no time for fools, and her effects pushes Peter to be more resilient. And vice versa. This is made more apparent by just how mundane and light the following issues are.
She's really changing the rules of how to do things and what not to do.
One which really stands out is the Vulture 2-parter, where Peter and MJ's goofy dynamic really comes into play. MJ witnesses a fucking murder and is scared shitless, so Peter does his part. Funny, since Gwen died, MJ's been looking after me. Now it's my turn to look after her, if she'll take my help. Peter makes her coffee, but she refuses to speak up, so he's got the patience of an angry hippo. You can hold your own hand, I'm not a towel shoulder for cowards. But his purpose was to get her mad enough that she'll be motivated again. By the way, on top of everything, in less than 10 issues after Gwen's death, life is so boring, he's working on the Spider-Mobile with Johnny. Yep, not even joking. Furthermore, when he tries to reconnect with Harry, who's mad at Spider-Man for killing his father, Peter stands quietly, with nothing to say. Actually, no, he's smiling and tries to charm him, but it doesn't work. There is a traumatic moment where Vulture grabs MJ and drops her, causing a painful flashback. So as Spider-Man saves her, he has to remind himself, what am I saying? This isn't Gwen. She can never be Gwen, not for me, but she's a person, a friend, someone I care about, and a scrawny excuse for a human being tried to kill her. Rest easy, kid. Everything's gonna be okay, even if it means the Vulture's death. The traumatic experience, though, is temporary because in the next issue, Peter goes after Vulture by being his usual flirty, fun self. Don't tell me this is the registration office, right?
That's what the door says, man. Can I help you?
You sure can, pretty lady. I'm looking for a girl.
That's what they all say.
A particular girl. She works in the biolabs. What a fucking weirdo. What I find extremely bizarre about these issues after Gwen's death was how it totally subverted my expectations. I was expecting some sort of loss of innocence type deal where the comics got darker, but it's the opposite. The comics actually feels lighter. Peter's joke here, his old angry loner thing where he doesn't have time for beautiful girls, comes back, as opposed to him crying over whether or not he should reach out to Gwen or that she's at home worrying. As a result, a tonal equilibrium reminiscent to the old Lee Ditko era where it was a high school sitcom and a workplace sitcom is kind of back. To the point that, guess what? In 8 issues after the tragic passing of Gwen, they do something pretty whack. Something absurd. Something that made me go, alright, hell yeah, bro. This is a real text box. Yes, this is a terrible secret. May Parker has inherited the most modern, privately owned atomic processing plant in the whole world. A plant that, in the wrong hands, could produce weapons powerful enough for a madman to wreak incredible havoc. Amazing. Peter's romance with Mary Jane is something a whole generation of editors and fans resent, and I can understand on a technical level.
I had wanted Gwen to be the one that Peter would get serious with. When Jerry Conway took over the series, I don't remember this, but he says he asked me if it would be okay to kill Gwen also, and he said I said yes. He's probably right, because I have a lousy memory. Right. But I shouldn't have said yes.
But studying these original comics, Mary Jane is a way better love story, and there's one simple reason. Mary Jane actually has a personality, one which doesn't disappear after she's fallen in love.
Gwen is sweet and lovable and not... Let's make Mary Jane hip and cool and with it.
Furthermore, Jerry Conway also takes advantage of the joke MJ was, where it's not just here's a surprisingly hot girl.
Peter did everything he could to avoid her.
But the more specific punchline of how the most suitable girl for Peter is, ironically, someone who can't be tied down. Peter has more in common with MJ than with Gwen. They're equally funny, flirty, good looking, and she's not even bothered by him running off. However, that's because she's always just living her best life. She immediately goes out with Harry when Peter isn't free, and still flirts with every good-looking guy afterwards. Thus, for there to be an actual love story, it requires MJ to grow. And that's what's so satisfying. Here are 2 people who feel totally real. They've both had separate lives and love lives, living in parallel from each other, fully realizing how they should fit into each other's lives.
You want to know how I feel about Petey, right? Whether I love him and all that. This is going to sound like a cop-out, but I don't want to love him. Can you dig with it? I like the guy too much for that kind of a scene.
When asked what kind of scene is that, MJ leaves. This is why the Raimi version is pretty universally maligned, unless you were like 8 years old when you saw them. Not only does she actively look for an affair,
Do you want to say something? I'm seeing somebody now.
but these movies took someone complex, very forward-thinking in terms of a love interest who has independent opinions and wants, then mowed it all down to create someone everyone makes jokes about for being the most outdated stereotypical damsel in distress of all time. Someone who literally can't survive without the affection of the men in her life. This isn't a character assassination, it's a straight up character nuke. I, for one, is now particularly grateful of an entire generation of people growing up with Michelle Jones, because seeing that version hesitate for a second and letting it sit at a no when it came to how she felt about Peter until the end, that hopefully means we can begin to detox people's brains.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anyways, I like Kirsten Dunst's MJ because I was 8 years old when I watched those movies. The moments where Peter and MJ's romance felt particularly real, in a way that felt more than Betty and Gwen, which kind of had a soap opera thing going on, was when Liz Allen came back. She's super stressed after leaving high school because she had to become a nurse to help her stepbrother, who's the molten man, so Peter brings her to MJ's to comfort her. There's a moment where he explains their history. He says he always had a crush, but that was actually Sally. It's a moment I'm sure most people who have partners outside of school have had, and both Peter and MJ share the responsibility in looking after Liz. Their bond is so comfortable and trusting that they already act like a couple. It's so natural. It's so invisible. Ben's death was the death of the old incel Peter Parker. Captain Stacy's death was arguably the death of boy Peter. Gwen's death is the death of Peter Parker as a whole, but there's MJ, there to give life back to that part of him, renewing his interest, and he became better for it. As a matter of fact, for a guy whose girl died so recently, I'd say Peter Parker is adjusting to things fairly well. Give him time, he'll come around.
We're stranded and beaten, reaching for helping hands. We may be defeated, but we'll see the make amends. When the time's right, we're gonna get all that's good. Yeah, when the time's right, oh, when the time's right, get inside this dream.
So that was Spider-Man Retrospective Part 6. I'm trying to get these out more regularly. Anyways, I hope no one minded the fact that I had a fever while making this video, so my voice is all kinds of fucked up.